Good evening once again. Let's try to answer this question. Grade 12, tomorrow you're writing. Okay, let's quickly answer these questions. Question 5, the graphs of f of x and g of x are represented in the sketch below. P and Q are the x-intercepts of f, and R is the turning point of f. A is a point on the graph of G. So these are the two graphs which are drawn for you guys. Okay, 5.1. Write down the equation of the x-axis of symmetry of f. So we just look at the graph of f, which is the parabola. Okay, and then you look at where there is a line of symmetry. So the symmetric line, it will be at the turning point of this graph. Okay, so the turning point, if we draw a line of symmetry here, it means it will cut this graph of f of x into two equal parts. Okay, so number one, it will be it's when x, you look at this is the turning point. Okay, so when you check the turning point from this equation, it's x plus 1, which is equals to 0. So our x here will be equals to -1. So the answer is x, which is equals to -1. So let's check again with regard to 5.2. 5.2, they're saying write down the coordinates of R, the turning points of f. So we've already returned the x value for the turning point. Okay, so it means the coordinate of R coordinates, we have -1. And then you know that when you are given an equation like this, -8, it represents the y turning point. Okay, the value of y. So this will be -8. So let's move to 5.3. Determine the coordinates of P and Q. So these are the x-intercepts of the graph of f. Okay, so now we need to calculate the coordinate of P and Q. Let me use this space here. So our graph, it's f of x, which is equals to 2x plus 1 squared minus 8. Okay, so whenever you are solving for x, you let f of x equals to 0. F of x is the same as y. Okay, so this will be 0 equals to 2x plus 1 squared minus 8, and then take this to the other side. So this will be positive 8 equals to 2x plus 1 squared. And then now you can divide both sides by 2. We divide both sides by 2, and then remains 4, which is equals to x plus 1 squared. Now you can square both sides to get rid of these 2, because we want to solve for x. Okay, so this will be the square root of 4, this will be the square root of 2. So our x here, it will be, this will be x plus 1, and here will be the square root of 4. It's always plus or minus 2. Okay, whenever you are removing the square root, it means that this will be positive or -2. Okay, therefore you conclude by saying x plus 1 is equals to +2. We start with +2, or x plus 1 is equals to -2, because it's positive and negative. Okay, so x will be 2 minus 1. Here x will be -2 minus 1. So x is equals to 1, or x equals to -3. It means here the coordinates of P will be, the coordinate of P will be negative what? Negative 3 and 0, because it's the x-intercept. So along x-intercept, our values of y are zeros for this point and this point. So the q coordinates, it will be 1 and 0 as well. So let's move to question 5.4. And determine the equation of g from 1. Okay, the inverse of g in the form y is equals to, okay, in the form y. Okay, that's fine. So let's check. We need to use the equation of g of x. The equation of g of x, it's g of x, which is equals to half exponent x. So g of x the same as y. Okay, so we can say y, it is equals to 1 divided by 2 exponent x. Therefore, if you want to find the inverse of this graph, you swipe the values. Where there is y, it will be x equals to half. Where there is x, replaced by y. Okay, so now every time when you have something like this, just know that this will be the base. Therefore, you convert by saying y is equals to log x base what? Base half. Okay, so this will be the inverse function, right? The inverse function of g of x. So let's move to 5.5. They're saying you need to sketch the graph of the inverse in your answer book. Clearly indicate the intercept with the axis and at least one other point of the inverse. So this is how you can draw your graph. Okay, let me try to draw the graph here. Graph. Look, there was this graph here. It was the graph of g, right? With this point here, whereby they said it's negative 2 and 4, and then the other point here, it's what? Let me check. The other point here, okay, it was 1 because the y-intercept. So y-intercept, whenever we replace x by 0, y will be equals to 1. So here it was 1 here. It was 1 here. So now whenever you draw your inverse graph of this line, it's not the opposite, but, or let me say, whenever y it's 1, it means now this graph is going to cut the x-axis. The inverse will always cut the x-axis. Okay, so it will be 1 here. So the graph will be drawn like this. This will be your graph of the inverse function. So it means now we're going to have at least one other point of the inverse. So another point, it can be right here. Since we are doing the opposite of what we have in the graph of g, since here it was y value for the graph of g, so here it will be the x value for the graph of g, the inverse, I mean. So it means now this point here, we are going to swipe these values. Where there is negative 2, it will be 4, and then where there is 4, it will be negative 2, just like that always, right? You just rearrange these values. Your x become your y become your what? Your x. This is what I wrote here. So now, you get your 3 marks for doing that. Let's move to question 5.6. They're saying if the inverse of graph of G is greater or equals to -2. So it means now if they're saying the inverse is greater or -2, which values of x? So if you want to work on this one, the inverse is greater or equal to -2, you have to check the graph of the inverse function, okay? So we want to check where y is greater or equals to -2. Okay, this is your -2 here. -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. Okay, sorry. 0, 1, because I said yeah, it's 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like that, okay? So now, let's check where y, which is the inverse here, will be greater or equals to -2. Let's check from -2, okay, from this point. So I change the x values from 4 moving to the y values. From this point here, moving to the positive y values. -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to positive infinity. They are greater than -2. So since we are checking the x values, it means we check the x values from 4 going backwards, just like that. Going backwards. But our x values will never touch the what? The 0 for x. Because this line here from the Cartesian plane is the y-axis. But now it becomes the asymptote of x, which is x equals to 0. So this line is x equals to 0. So our graph will never touch this line, okay? So it means now our solution will be, it's from 4 up until to 0,1, not equals to 0, because this graph will never touch the what? Will never touch the line which is x equals to 0. So it means our solution in this case, it will be in this form. It will be x, it's an element of x, it's an element of 0 is to 4. We always start from the left to right. From the left to right. Do you understand this? From left to right, or you can say from the small value to the bigger value. So the small is this one and the bigger, it's 4 here. So it will be x, an element of open small bracket, small bracket, because x is not equal to 0, because this one is your asymptote, okay? And x, it is equal to 4. And then we're told that this is greater or equals to -2. So it will be x, it's equals to 4. Or you can use the inequality form to say that our x, just because it is between 0 and 4, right? So x is greater than 0, because from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All these x values that are greater than 0. So x is greater than 0 or less than or equals to. I said here we're using greater than. We're using greater than, not equals to. Agree. Sometimes you're going to say greater or equals to. So for 0 it's only greater than. We do not include equals to because x is not equals to 0. This is the asymptote. But here we include equals to because x it is equals to 4. So this is how we can write the solution. So let's check the last question. The last question they're saying for which values of x will or is, x times f of x is less than 0. I spoke about this. If you can check my videos, okay, if you can check my videos, I spoke about this, and then I said that you just draw your vertical line passing through the what, the x-intercept of the graph of f, the x-intercept of the graph of f. Okay, so it means you're going to have part A, part B, and between these two, part C, and this will be part D. And then now you see the x value here is negative times the positive line of f, because above this horizontal line, this line is starting from negative. The side is this -3 and this is 1. Okay, starting from -3 up to -infinity. These x values are negative multiplied by positive. We are getting negative. Therefore, it means we're going to use this part A, because whenever you multiply x times f of x, or whenever we multiply x times y, we're getting less than 0. And then I said less than means negative, so we got a negative answer here. So from -3 up to 0, all these x values here, they are negative. So whenever you multiply with these y values, all these y values are negative. So negative times negative is positive. So we cannot use part B because we're getting a positive sign. Let's move to C. For C here, it's from 0 up to 1. So the x values here, they are positive from 0 to 1. But the line of f of x is negative. So positive times negative is negative. Therefore, we're going to use this part C. What about part D? Let's check part D. Or part D, the x values are positive, but the y values are positive as well. So positive times positive, it's positive. Therefore, we cannot use this. This part B, part D. We're going to use part A and part C. So the solution will be like this. Let me write it here. We always start from left to right? So this will be -infinity up to -3. So the solution, it can be written like this. X is an element of -infinity to -3, because we start from small to the big values. So the small is -infinity because -3 is greater than -infinity. Okay, and then you say or what? Or you check between 0 and 1. We'll say it's 0 is to 1. So this is how you can write your answer. Or you can use the inequalities to say for this part here, you can say x, it's less than -3, because -4, -5 up to -infinity, they're less than what? -3. Or we can say x is greater than 0, because from 0 to 1, x is greater. 0,5 is greater than 0. That's why I'm saying x is greater than 0, and x is less than 1, because from 1 to 0, all the x values, 0,5 is less than what? 1. So this is how you can answer all these questions. Thank you very much, guys.